Hoyne, what's your overall observation?
Yeah, so there's probably two things that I bang on, a lot, if you like, and one of them, as I just mentioned before, is I'll back history until history changes, if you like, and then the other one is it's not who but how. So, and what I'm meaning by that is that there's a lot of talk, across the season or over a 4-week period, 6-week period, if you like, that we break down, they've only played this team or they've only played that team or, they've had a really hard draw or whatever it might be. Just park that to one side because the how component and how you're playing is going to hold you in good stead if the profile is strong. Or if the profile is poor, but the results are actually, sort of going in a different direction, at some stage that will correct itself and the results will actually come back to the pack. We saw that with a few teams last year where, sort of coming to mind was Essendon at the halfway stage of the year. Everyone was sort of believing in terms of what they were doing and what have you, but the profile wasn't really there to believe it. And then, we saw what happened in the last 6 or 7 weeks of the season last year. So just a couple of teams that I just want to put, sort of on the agenda, if I can, in regards to this. So I heard you say on the way in, Kane, that was sort of, that we are going to give Fremantle a bit of a mulligan, and fair enough too, with their performance against, West Coast over the weekend. But the reality is with Fremantle, with how they play and the profile that they're dishing up at the moment, it is not a sustainable profile that's going to take them to a prelim final weekend, and results like the weekend shouldn't actually be a surprise because there's only so long that you can generate between 40 to 45 entries per week. We've talked about on this show that in their games, the ball lives between the arcs. It's a hard way to play for 23, 24 weeks of the year. So having performances like that on the weekend, I think are going to come sort of, probably a little bit more frequently than we actually think, because the way that they play is just, I think, a too hard a brand of footy to actually, sort of have that as your sustainable mode across the season.
You've always said you beat Freo at the contested ball, you beat Freo. Yeah. And that played out again on the weekend.
Yeah, correct. And then, the Carlton performance, we get sucked into, Carlton losing against Adelaide. Oh, they've got a hard draw coming up at the moment. What's that actually going to look like? Relax. The way that they're actually playing. We talked last week around, the Pitnet and Tom Kane discussion. I'm still interested to see how that actually plays out. I'm not actually sold yet whether or not that is going to be in place come first week of finals. It might be, but it's still going to be an interesting watch. But in terms of Carlton's overall performance, their game is actually in good shape. Relax. Don't worry about the draw coming up. That will take care of itself. They've come up against GWS, taken care of that despite the injuries because their profile is in good shape. People talk about Geelong at the moment. They haven't actually played anyone or whatever it might be. We talk about the most important aspect of the game. The most important aspect of the game is the turnover game. There is no one that is playing the turnover game better than what Geelong have done. And with what they've done after round 6, we've only seen that achieved in the turnover game 20 times over the last 20 years. When that's been done, 70% of those teams have made at least a prelim final. So their game is in great shape at the moment, coming up against this so-called challenging draw. Don't worry about the draw. If your game's in good shape, that will take care of itself. They might drop a game to Carlton this week. They might drop a game to Melbourne this week, and some people will go, I told you so. No, just relax. Their game is in good shape. The interesting one to me for this week is Brisbane. And I talked about last week with Brisbane that their profile at the moment is in really good shape. And maybe I'm a little bit too much of a believer in them. I'll give them one more chance against GWS this week. But in terms of what they're doing at the moment, that game on the weekend against Geelong, and I'm not too sure what you guys think around that one, that's a hard one to sort of really take any sort of... Yeah, correct. It's a hard one to sort of take any sort of real substance about it. It was disappointing in terms of how they let Geelong score out the back. But in terms of everything else, it's a weird game. You don't see many games as wet and as sort of played in that sort of manner. So in a way, I'm almost parking that one to the side and really looking forward to seeing what happens Thursday night against GWS because, again, their profile is in really good shape in terms of what they're doing defensively, which is first and foremost.
How's the Giants' profile?
I'm going to get into the Giants a little bit later on. And then just the last one around this is, again, I keep talking about the turnover game and people are going to think I'm banging on about it. The reason why I'm banging on about it, 17 of the last 18 premiers have been top 3 in it. Right now, 1, 2, 3, Geelong 1, Sydney 2, Carlton 3. So we will keep tracking that on this show for the whole year. 17 of 18 have been top 3, have gone on to win the flag. It's a significant body of work. So
seemed to be the biggest thing to me that came out of the Swans game on the weekend. They've been essentially a ball movement team, but on the weekend they were very much that front half turnover team, which
they have been that this year too.
The whole time?
Yeah, they have.
Okay.
They dismantled Collingwood in that aspect of the game. They just completely shut them down ahead of the ball. They did that against Melbourne. They did that against Gold Coast on the weekend as well. So I think sometimes we talk about just got to take a bit of a deep breath sometimes and just
Kane, I know I've heard this before, but I just want to put it down and note it for the historians. On the Tuesday, the 23rd of the 4th, 2024 at 8 minutes past 6, Daniel Hoyne said, "It's the how, not the who."
That's it.
And that's what we've got to assess right through.
So if anyone else says in 24 hours' time it's the how, not the who.
Not the who.
We know where it originated from. Hey, not good news for the Harley Reid mania at the moment. He's having a rest this week. West Coast is resting Harley Reid, according to Tom Morris, this week. No injuries, just managed. It's going to be confirmed when the Eagles announce their team on Thursday. For Sunday's game. So
that's taken the
what are they going to do?
Wind out of the sail.
What are they going to do over there? What are they going to talk about?
Hope he doesn't go to the boxing.
And just waiting for the update with Jesse Hogan at the Tribune as well. Once that comes into hand, the verdict, they're deliberating. We'll give that to you live as it happens. Let's get into Hoyne's 7 main talking points. Are the Pies back?
Yeah, so I was actually asked by a few people over the weekend, can you just do a bit of a deep dive on Collingwood for us? And I promised that I would. So we'll just get into Collingwood to start with. So I'm not jumping absolutely on the train that they're back at the moment. I mean, I just want to see a little bit more first. And there's a bit of similarities about what Geelong were doing last year as well, losing their first 3. Then they won their next 3, and everyone's saying, they're back, here they go. They're the best team in the comp. Again, just relax. We're just going to see a fair bit more, albeit that was unbelievably powerful with what they did over that 45, 50-minute period. But what I want to talk about is just assessing and looking at Collingwood differently to 2023 than what we did. So we talked a lot on this show last year that their point of difference was their explosion and ball movement game off their back half. And if they didn't have that last year, they don't win the flag. That has absolutely dissipated, sort of this year. And there's actually no one in the competition that's scoring less in the competition off their back half ball movement than what Collingwood were.
Why is it so?
I think teams have gone to work on them. I think teams have looked at it, as you clearly do, and have a look at, okay, how do you beat this team? How do you beat the Premier? What do you need to do to it? And clearly that was their weapon last year. What I just wanted to give a fair bit of praise to is this coaching staff to be able to actually adjust on the run and potentially adjust over pre-season as well, knowing potentially that this is coming. Everyone's going to try and unpack this ball movement game. They've now gone to an absolute dominant forward half team in the competition. Only Carlton are scoring more off the back of their forward half work in the comp, and it's their ability to be able to capitalise off what they're doing in their forward half turnover. In their forward half turnover game, that's so impressive. That's what they were able to do against Port Adelaide on the weekend. That forward half pressure, win the ball back, and then be able to get it back on the scoreboard. We didn't really see that component of their game last year. They didn't need to, just given how good their ball movement game was. But we are seeing a different Collingwood team, and that performance on the weekend was just, as I said, absolutely brutal. The other point I just wanted to sort of just put a little bit of a note to is that they're 3-3. And, probably aside, from Dacos, their best player in Jordan De Goey, other than the weekend, has had an absolute stinker of a season so far. And they've got to this point where he's 3-3. So at the moment of our new rating system, he's a 304th rated player in the competition.
Jordan De Goey, 300.
And 304th rated player in the competition and the AFL's worst kick in the competition. You don't usually associate that with Jordan De Goey. So there is...
Was Jordan Dawson 2 weeks ago?
So Jordan Dawson's now the 8th worst kick in the comp. He's sort of improved a little bit. Still the 8th worst, which is not really what you want to be associated with. But for Jordan De Goey to be the AFL's worst kick in the competition, for him to be rated as the 304th best player in the competition, and to still be 3-3 with your game improving, I think is significant positives for where Collingwood can actually get to. And that's sort of probably more what I'm looking forward to over the next 4 to 6 weeks. If he can get going, that's when I think we'll start jumping on the Collingwood train a little bit more than what we are now.
So for people that are wondering out there, are you factoring in high-pressure kicks? How do you assess your kick rating?
So you're factoring how much pressure he's actually under and what type of kicks he's trying to take off. So we're not looking at kicking efficiency. That's a bit misleading. Yep. We're sort of taking into account all those parameters, if you like.
How's the captain going at the Pies?
He was better after quarter time, but his season, he's probably his first 20 quarters of the year were probably a long way off from where we actually saw him over the previous, sort of 2 to 3 years.
What about the flat track bullies and the accusations levelled towards Port Adelaide this week? Hoyne, what detail have you got on them?
Yeah, so clearly there's one massive concern at the moment with Port, and that was there last year, and we're sort of sitting back now. We're now 6 weeks in, so we've got real data to work with and a real sample size to work with. You're sitting back at Port Adelaide and you're looking and you're going, okay, we get talked about that, they've brought in a Sava and they've got, sort of Zerk Thatcher, so now they've got this defensive unit that they haven't had in place before, and that should elevate their game. Well, let's see it. Let's see if this is actually real or if this is still false. And the area of concern last year was that that they weren't able to hold up in their defensive 50. Their ability to be able to lock the ball in their forward half was strong and has been strong under Ken for many years. But their ability to be able to hold up when the ball goes in there is their concern. That is again at play at the moment. So the concern for me is that they are the 5th easiest team to score against when the ball goes inside 50. They rely so much on the ball being locked in their forward half to protect this defensive 50. The reality is for me is that when you play good opposition, are you going to be able to play that way for 120 minutes? And I don't think that you are. So when the game actually doesn't go your way, can you actually hold up? And what we've seen so far with Port Adelaide is no. And the main reason as to why is what is happening at ground level in their defensive 50. Only North Melbourne are worse at winning a ground ball in their D50 than what Port Adelaide are this year. Their performance on the weekend against Collingwood to lose ground ball in their defensive 50 by 15 is the second worst result we have ever recorded in a game of footy. Second worst result in 25 years.
Give me that again, the ground ball differential.
Their ground ball work against Collingwood in their defensive 50 is the second worst we have ever recorded in 25 years.
Well, it was pretty bad when they played Collingwood at the MCG last year from memory as well, at about this time last year. I remember talking about their ground ball numbers. Perhaps that was across the board, but they were awful as well.
Shocking. And then in terms of how often they gave up a score. So when a team has 60, sort of 60 plus entries, it usually means that, there's a lot of numbers camped in their forward half, so it's going to be hard to sort of, really generate quality and effective inside 50s, if you like. For Collingwood to score almost 6 out of 10 times that they went inside 50, only North Melbourne and West Coast over the last couple of years have done that defensively.
Right.
So that's how bad of a defensive performance that we saw from Port Adelaide on the weekend. Their one-on-one work is pretty strong, and it's a lot stronger than we have seen in previous years with these additions, with these tall blokes. But when the ball is on the deck, that is a massive concern. And until that corrects and until that fixes itself, that is going to be the question mark on how far Port Adelaide can go this season.
I know you do the numbers, you don't do the coaching. Kane, is it personnel or is it midfielders not pushing back hard enough? Is it role players off the half-forward line not getting back hard enough, or just poor personnel in their defence at the ground ball?
Yeah, and I think the wings come into it as well. So I just don't know how strong their wings are. Like in terms of Bergman, he's good aerially from the wing position, but he's not great at ground level. Then it's a bit of a toss of the coin who plays wing. When Boak's there, he plays a bit of it. Young Jackson Mead is finding his feet. He's played a bit of it. Is it one of those midfielders who's an inside midfielder that gets pushed out to the wing? So the wings, their inability to get back hard and win ground ball inside defensive 50 is an issue. And then their big backs are reasonably cumbersome, aren't they? Like, there's a lot of key defenders that are still pretty good on the ground, but Radaglia, Zerk Thatcher, and the big fella Aaliyah, not great at ground level. So it's a mix of things, and then your midfielders pushing back hard. You watch how hard Nick Dacos works back to win a ground ball inside he's always the first one there. That's the textbook prototype how to win a ground ball inside defensive 50.
Kane, are you worried about Butters, Horn Francis, and Rosie, and that being it, if you like? In terms of, you looked at what they were doing towards the end of last year, and if you sat on one of them, or if one of them had a quiet performance, there wasn't much else underneath it to be able to sort of correct and actually adjust. And Butters on the weekend, like his first quarter was ridiculous. Yeah. And then his next two quarters, he was hardly sighted. And Rosie was hardly sighted for the whole game.
He was. Rosie is as poor a game as I've seen for a fair time now, perhaps 12 months. So I think there's more now than there was last year, though. So I think it's not as reliant on that. Like, Willem Drew's a serious player now, and he's starting to. I know you rate him highly. I think he's in your top 10. So he's there. Is he a match winner? No, but he's a really important player. My concern is the forward six. If Dixon's not there, and you can't probably rely on Charlie to be there for large portions, it's a bonus when he does play. Willie Rioli, what are you going to get from Willie? What are you going to get from Todd Marshall? So that's my concern. There's probably just, as I said last night on Sports Day, 5 or 6 players that I don't know what you're going to get week to week. Could be great, could be awful, and on the weekend for the majority, particularly after quarter time, it was awful. What about the Western Bulldogs, Hoyne? Where do they sit in terms of it's not how, it's who, or not who, it's how?
I'm a little bit opposite to the Dockers in sort of not really giving them that mulligan because of their overall performance. I'm giving them the mulligan against Essendon because what they've done since round 1, and we talked about this a couple of weeks ago, their profile is actually really strong. That performance against Essendon was a little bit sort of, geez, where did that sort of come from, if you like, and a real sort of reflection on how Essendon are actually going at the moment. So credit where credit's due there. But like we were talking about with Port, looking at the Dogs, one area of improvement to come in this year, can you find that person behind the footy that's the interceptor roadblock that's going to cause a little bit of confusion to the opposition?
Karma bus, Gerard.
Absolutely.
He's there.
Absolutely.
He was there for every club to pick up 2 years ago, and the Dogs have done it well to develop him.
So in terms of what he's done since round 1, he's taken the most intercept marks in the competition. And Liam Jones has taken the second most intercept marks in the competition. So can Liam Jones be the player that Stephen May is and that Sam Taylor is, in terms of he'll take the main key forward each week but still be the interceptor? He's doing that at the moment. What Buku Kamas is doing at the moment, number 1 intercept marker in the competition, but the Dogs, there's no one that generates more scores off their intercept work in the competition than what Karmas does at the moment. No one is generating more scores than what he is doing. So for him to be able to do that, for Jones to be able to do that, for their defensive profile to be in really good shape at the moment in terms of top 6 in all the key areas that we're looking for, that's the sort of profile that we're talking about in terms of what's sustainable and what's not. They've got the ability to be able to move the ball from one end of the ground to the other. They do it the best in the competition. They do it differently to most in the competition. They've got the ability to be able to hold up in their defensive 50 at the competition. Very different profile to what we're talking about with Fremantle in terms of, okay, I'm going to give them the mulligan against Essendon and I'm not going to give Fremantle the mulligan against West Coast as such. So just a bit of credit to the Dogs, and I'll probably sit here on Tuesday night and Fremantle might roll them, and I'll be sitting here and I'll be rolling my eyes going, what do I go with this for? But in terms of their profile at the moment, like what they're doing, and really interested to see what happens Saturday night over in WA.
All right, we've got a lot to get through with Hoyne. You can send through your questions as well, 0433 98 11 16. Before we have a short breather, Hoyne, what's the clue for Guess Who tonight?
So Guess Who? These are the 4 easiest teams to score against off turnover. North Melbourne, the easiest. West Coast, the second easiest. Essendon, the third easiest. Who is the 4th easiest team to score against off turnover?
Who's the 4th easiest team to score off from turnover? I might have a stab, Hoyne, because you do these little trick sort of questions as if it's a poor team. So it has to be a good team. I'm going to say the Bombers.
You know me too well.
I'm going to say the Giants.
So the Bombers are the 3rd easiest team to score against off turnover at the moment. Their performance against Adelaide was significantly better, but still the 3rd easiest team to score against. Who are you going, Jay?
I'm going the Giants.
We've been in the studio for 18 months and he's finally got one, Kane. He's got one. He's going to pop the champagne now. Look at him.
I'll get the Moe going tonight.
Off you go. You go, Gerard. You go home.
Okay.
Your work is done.
I'm not drinking, though.
So how concerning is that then, Hoyne? If everyone's been the premiership favourites a week ago?
I think they're a bit concerned about it from all reports.
Yeah, and I think you have a look at their performances recently, and they were inconsistent against Gold Coast, inconsistent. Last week, I can't remember who they played last week, but and then they were inconsistent against Carlton as well. So if you have a look in terms of what they're doing offensively,
St Kilda,
they have the best offense in the competition at the moment. They are dangerous in terms of what they do with ball in hand, their ability to be able to get it inside 50, move it, all that sort of stuff. They are lethal at the moment. But in terms of what they're doing without the footy, it's the 9th best profile at the moment. So to put that into comparison, in the second half of last season, before heading into finals, they had the 2nd best profile in the competition.
Can I just jump in, Hoyne, just as we're speaking about the Giants? Jesse Hogan is free to play.
Yep.
Jesse Hogan's charge has been thrown out. So, I mean, not sure it'll help him in scores off turnover, but it'll certainly help them having one of the Coleman medal favourites out there this weekend for a big game against Brisbane. So,
not surprised, Kane. I didn't think there was any force in it.
I'm not surprised at all. A week for stupidity, perhaps, if you're going to give him a week, but the contact wasn't sufficient enough to get a week. So I think the tribunal have made a good decision there, and that adds to the intrigue around this game against Brisbane. You were saying, Hoyne, about their inability to stop scores off turnover.
So their profile heading into finals last year was rock solid in terms of what they were able to do, from their turnover game, but then what they were able to do with their full ground defence. Their ability to be able to hold up in their defensive 50 was as good as anyone in the competition. They were willing to concede entries. The ball just moved in their games up and down the ground, but they backed in their defensive 6 and their defensive 7 to, sort of to be able to hold up, in that area of the ground.
And this was a problem with Sam Taylor.
Yeah, 100%. Well. So just don't park this just to one side at the moment and just say, you're sort of reacting to what they did against Carlton. Go and have a look at what they've done just from a pure points against column sort of this year. It's in between that 80 to 90 sort of point barrier, which you don't really associate with the Giants, and you don't really associate with the top 4 team. You're more looking at that high 60s to mid sort of 70s, sort of points against, if you like. But in terms of what they're sort of, sort of been able to do this year in terms of defend that absolute pure counter-attack game from the opposition. So, so we talked about Collingwood last year, their ability to be able to explode off that halfback area. There's no team in the competition that's easier to score against in that area of the ground this year than what the Giants have been. So clearly that is of concern for GWS, and I'm sure that will be a clear focus for where they're trying to head to over the next 5, 6, 7 weeks. As I said at the top of the show, you don't want your whole game, I don't think, to be in absolute rock solid order at the moment. If you go through all premiers over the last 10, 15 years and you run the exercise, no one has had their game in absolute perfect condition at this stage of the season. Clearly, at the moment, they're not. But I think everyone just needs to just step back a little bit, sort of with the Giants. They're easy to love with terms of how they move the ball. They're easy to love with the amount of talent that they've got at the moment. But defensively, their system at the moment is a long, long, long way off where it was the back end of last year, and I think where many probably assume that they are at the moment. So it's going to be an interesting watch to see how that improves over the next 4 to 6 weeks.
Just on the Giants, I was having with their draft. Young Phoenix, can't remember his last name. Phoenix, who that's?
Gothard.
Phoenix Gothard. It's a strange pick so early, given that they've got so many small forwards, and they ended up taking another small forward to pick 51, who's now playing pretty good football, young Harvey.
Yeah, I mean, you can't judge that until probably the next 4 or 5 years, but it'd be an interesting one for us to track.
Just those teams are in for tomorrow night's game. So 4 changes for the Tigers: Grimes, Naismith, Hopper, Banks in. Sonsi omitted, which I don't know. If he's not playing with where Richmond are at, something is wrong. McAuliffe also omitted. Short's injured. Kazitsky, no surprises, has been omitted for the Ds. Pickett, Laurie and Turner are in. Tholstrup's been omitted. Salem's injured, and Ben Brown has been omitted. There's your team for the big Anzac Eve game tomorrow. Continuing your 7 main talking points, Hoyne, and the Cats are up next.
Yeah, so I just want to talk about Geelong in a different, in a different context, if we can. So there's been sort of many instances, if you like, over our 25 years where we've had to sort of change and adapt to what certain teams are doing and where the game's going and how it's heading and how we actually analyse performance and how we analyse the game, if you like. And I just want to just put Geelong on the agenda in terms of how we've had to sort of adapt on the run in terms of changing the way that we position players and how we analyse player performance.
Yep.
So forever and a day, we've had to associate a player with a primary position and we've had to benchmark them against that primary position, if you like. So that primary position being purely where do you play your most minutes on the ground? So previously, under that system, we would have benchmarked, say, for instance, Nick Dacos, who's a general defender. He plays 51% of his game time as a general defender. And we're benchmarking him against Adam Sard, who plays 100% of his game time as a general defender. And I'm sitting there going, this isn't right. It's not the right way to do it. And the Geelong example, they have been the hardest team for us for the last 5, 6, 7 years to actually categorise their players into a primary position. You think of the pin-up example being Mark Blitzarves, who has created headaches for us for 10 years, if you like. So that's why we've now introduced our new rating system, the 100X rating system, which abolishes this, and we can absolutely assess everything in totality. We're not benchmarking absolute primary positions against primary position. We're benchmarking your overall performance, if you like, to be able to come up with this rating system. Otherwise, we're going to get left behind. We're not judging players that play with Geelong or that Nick Dacos example, if you like, correctly. So you have a look at this team at the moment, and so far this year, we're 6 games in. They have 8 players at the moment that I would call magnet players that just get moved all over the ground and make it impossible to give them a primary position. We don't have to worry about that anymore. But you look at what Tom Atkins has done over the last 3 weeks. He's now playing as a halfback flanker. He was their, he was their grunt inside premiership midfielder, tackle machine, and whatever it was. And it was probably him and Dangerfield last year as their midfielders. They're now moved into a halfback flank. You look at Mitch Duncan. Mitch Duncan plays across a halfback flank, but in their 2 wet games against Hawthorn and Brisbane, he plays as as a half-forward flanker to get that, real elite ball use. Mark O'Connor has played wing back all year. On the weekend, 100% midfield time against Lachie Neale. Jack Bowes plays as a midfielder for his 3 games this year. Against Brisbane in the wet, Tom Stewart goes down, I'm going to play across halfback for the last 50, 60 minutes of the game. He has the best game of his career. You look at Mark Blitzarves. Of his career. You look at Mark Blitzarves and what he's done sort of this season. In the back end of 2022 and for 2023, he was mainly that ruck centre bounce midfielder. He's now playing close to half of his game time on the wing. So it's totally different what they're doing and what he's able to do with this, with these magnets, which makes him so hard to actually coach against, and this coaching group so hard to actually coach against. But I just want to just give it credit because, from a team perspective, we've had to adjust, for the best part of 25 years. But now from an individual sense, they're the cornerstone as to why we've had to sort of change on the run to be able to sort of, adjust with how we rate and benchmark players.
Going to be tough for you and the All-Australian panel, Kane, to pick out a specialist wingman as against a person who plays 50% there, who may be rating a lot higher than the specialist.
I think it's I know with the NBA and the All-Star team, they used to pick the team in positions. Now, essentially, they just pick the best 5, or they've sort of ruled out that you have to pick players in certain positions because of the changing nature and the versatility of those players. So that's what's happening there, and I wonder whether that'll be the case in the All-Australian team, whether you just pick the best 22 players. Now, that's fraught with danger, of course, but it's a discussion. It's a discussion to have now. If you're just joining us, Jesse Hogan's charge has been thrown out. He's free to play, the tribunal said. In light of this ruling, for the charge of striking to be sustained, it is necessary that there is a finding of more than negligible impact. We find that there was not. Hoyne, tell us about the Gold Coast Suns.
Yeah, so I was interested to hear about discussions around Daniel Rioli and whatever's going on up there. But it got me thinking that a player like him is absolutely ideal for where Gold Coast are heading, and probably one of the final pieces of their team at the moment. So in terms of what they're doing without the footy, second best without the footy profile behind Geelong this year. Huge tick for what Hardwick is actually doing. With the footy, fifth worst offensive profile in the competition, mainly because there's no team that struggles to move the ball more in the competition than what Gold Coast are doing at the moment. So far this season, they have rotated 8 halfback flankers through their team at the moment across 6 weeks, and I think it's absolutely fair enough to have a bit of a deep dive into let's start with Sexton, a bit of Rory Atkins, Connor Butterick, whoever it might be, and now it's Sam Flanders. The Sam Flanders experiment at the moment, it's only a couple of games in, 34 disposals on the weekend, no impact. 10th lowest rated player on the ground. So in terms of that, and in terms of what Flanders is actually doing as a midfielder, performing significantly above expectation. As a halfback flanker, performing a little bit below expectation at the moment. So I'll be interested to see whether or not he works or not.
How's Lukosius going in that role?
And Lukosius, as a kicker coming out of your D50, he's the 8th worst kick in the competition.
Gee.
So everyone talks to me about how good his ball use is and what have you. Struggle to actually see it. He looks like a beautiful kick, but the outcome and the results that he has in place at the moment are not there. So
he's a good-looking misser.
Yeah, absolutely. A stylish misser, I think. A few people would actually probably describe him as. But in terms of that position at the moment, they have a lot going right for him in terms of what they're doing defensively. The midfield's going all right. Had a poor performance on the weekend against Sydney. Don't panic too much about that. But in terms of where they're going over the next 18 months, sort of to 2 years, that's the missing piece of the puzzle. And a player like Daniel Rioli makes a lot of sense in terms of, sort of what this team needs moving forward.
It's a good example of the number of possessions not being the issue, Kane.
Correct. Yep. Don't judge it.
It's impact.
Don't judge it.
Give
on
me impact.
It's not how many.
No, give me impact.
Hey, the lid's off at Bomberland. Should it be?
Yeah, huge. I just want to give them a huge credit at the moment in terms of what they're doing with this midfield brigade, and obviously, off the back of what Durham and Caldwell are doing from a pressure sense. So there's still a lot that does need to improve. What we saw against Adelaide, massive tick. Need to see more of it first before we're actually jumping on. But in terms of what this midfield group is doing, they are the second hardest team in the competition this year. When you're winning a possession at stoppage to then turn it into a clearance and get it going your way.
Right.
So their pressure off the back of what Caldwell and Merritt and Durham are doing is the second best in the competition at restricting the opposition. To put that into context for Essendon supporters, they were the easiest team in the competition to do that against last year. So going from the easiest to the second hardest, this is the sort of stuff that we're looking at for Essendon to sort of, to start taking them seriously as a finals contender.
So the opposition wins first possession, but you get it back.
But they strip them of it.
Okay.
So that pressure to be able to strip them of it.
Yep.
So this year, to put it in context, in terms of winning a first possession, they're -7, so 13th in the competition.
Yep.
But their overall clearance results, they're +22, which makes them the second best clearance team in the competition. Off the back of that willingness to pressure, hunt, strip, and then go. So to see that on Thursday coming up against Nick Dacos, coming up against De Goey and Pendlebury and what have you, that is going to be a fascinating battle in that aspect of the game.
I'm glad you raised that because it does put into perspective just how much more complex the centre clearance is rather than just giving the credit to a ruckman all the time.
Yep.
Or the reverse, he gets the whack.
Yep. Yeah.
Because
So people talk to me about Goldstein and Draper and their impact on the game. To be fair, they're not really having impact on the matches at the moment. It's what they're doing at ground level, this midfield group, to then, as I said, hunt, strip, and then go, with your own offensive clearances has been a huge positive for what they're doing. Looking forward to seeing it on Thursday.